So I've been so far talking about Rome as the antitype or a mockery of God's kingdom, but there are many ways if you could read it the other way, and I'll do that for a bit now too, thinking about how God's kingdom in Revelation can be also read as a mimicry of Rome, of copying and recycling what signifies power in the Roman Empire. One verse that kind of shows the tension between these two possibilities comes from Revelation chapter 11, verse 15. And it says, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Messiah." So there are many ways that you can read that, right? In which is it that one is destroyed and the other has come? Or has it simply morphed so that they are the same, right? That you cannot tell the difference between the two. And you can take some interpretive freedoms and think about this verse in describing all of the text of Revelation of how do we understand, this tension of both critiquing the empire, but also seeming to replicate everything in it, right? So the worldly kingdom is become, right, has become the kingdom of our Lord and of our Messiah. And I've used this Colossus, the fragments of the Colossus of Constantine to sort of showcase exactly what happens when Christianity becomes an institutionalized state religion. Then it does become empire, right? It becomes co-joined with empire, as we see with the figure of Constantine, who had no qualms of using absolute power, right? So there is a way that there's been this uncomfortability of understanding power, how to theologize it and use it in images in a way that seems to also replicate and mimic. There are also very nitty-gritty ways in which this happens in Revelation, where it seems like it's mimicking and replicating what we see in the Roman Empire as well. So, for example, we have in Revelation chapter 4, we have a description of the throne room. So, around the throne of God are 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones are 24 elders dressed in white robes with golden crowns on their heads. There have been some who have pointed out that this is very similar to what are called lictors. That would follow along with the two consuls that are in charge, the magistrates and the magistracy of the Roman Empire. So a lictor is basically bodyguard, courtier, strongman, right? That would follow along with the consul or the emperor and other of the ranks within Roman governmental power, the magistrates. And there were these guys who would carry, in these depictions, you'll see, they look like a bundle of sticks, and at the top of which is an axe head. It's part of the threat, right, of protection and defense that they show. And in the coin we have of Brutus, who is one of the assassinators of Caesar. He is this is his coin on the back. This is the backside of the two lictors you'll see carrying their fasces. That's the instrument, the weapon that they're holding. And he's walking in the middle, and they're being led by some other administrative person. And on the right-hand side, here's a relief from the first century of some of the lictors that would attend whatever was happening in the Senate or with the consul. So by the time of Domitian, actually, usually you have two consuls in the Roman Empire, and they would each have 12 lictors. They're bodyguards, they're bouncers, right, who are with them. Under Domitian, he demanded 24. And emperors ever after had 24. And so we have this possibility, right, of these 24 attendants, right, who are part of the throne of God. That's not the only possibility. There are many other possibilities, right? 24 could represent, some have suggested, on the one hand, we have the 12 tribes of Israel, and on the other hand, we have the 12 apostles of Christ, right, as creating the 24. And that, of course, is a good interpretation of that verse. But there are other factors within the throne room scene that may also point to Roman imperial power as being represented in these very particular ways. So another example of that is the crown. So we have similarly the elders, the 24, they fall before the throne who is seated on the throne and worship the one who lives forever and ever. And they cast their crowns before the throne. So this is a gesture of surrender, of submission, of obeisance. And we have, for example, in Tacitus, in the Annals, he tells of this happening under Nero. In the midst, on a tribunal, was a chair of state, and on the chair, a statue of Nero, so symbolic of the emperor. And to this, Tiridates advanced. He is a governor, a client king at the time, and having slain the customary victims for sacrifice, he removed the crown from his head and set it at the foot of the statue. And there are many other accounts of the taking of a diadem off as a form of submission, right? And so when we have the 24 elders who are casting their crowns before the throne, this is also understood as part of an act that you would do to show your obedience to imperial power or your submission or surrender in that way. We also have, hold on here, in chapter 4, the verses in the hymnody of "You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power." And this is said in the throne room. We have in Suetonius writing about Domitian, and this is not the only claim of this, but he says, with arrogance, he, Domitian, began as follows in issuing a circular letter that would get circulated around in the name of his procurators, so pretending to write as his people under him, saying, "Our Lord and our God bids that this be." So exactly the words, except in Latin, Dominus et Deus Noster, so that our Lord and our God, supposedly Domitian is demanding that he be called this, and understood in this particular way and being hailed in this way. So there are several accounts of this. Whether or not he demanded it or not is unclear. And Suetonius also has his bias as writing as a historian. But it's interesting that this particular phrasing is being used in chapter 4 as well. And then in chapter 5, we have the seer saying, "I saw between the throne and the 4 living creatures among the elders a lamb standing as if it had been slaughtered." And we are understanding also that God, the divine, is in the presence of the throne room, right? So at no point do we have a true description of God separate than the Son of Man or the Lamb, but it's understood that God is present within this. God is present in the temple, etc. And the Lamb is another manifestation, or the Son, right? Understood in those particular terms. And it's been pointed out by some scholars that this similarly could be understood as the emperor being present at a moment when there is a sacrifice, right? So the lamb that is slaughtered represents a sacrifice, and very literally, right, a paschal lamb, understanding in Jewish Passover ritual, right, of the lamb that has been slain, standing bleeding, as we've seen in different depictions, but also that the power that is, right, that rules over everything is overseeing that particular sacrifice, which is the story and the understanding of that narrative for Jesus Christ. Here I've shown this relief of Marcus Aurelius. This is in the Capitoli Museum in Rome, where you have Marcus Aurelius giving a sacrifice in front of the temple, right? So he is, you see the bull in the back that's going to be sacrificed, and he is attending. And we have emperors as those who are present at particular sacrifices. So there is a possibility of drawing this parallel as well of having a divine figure and then the sacrifice, or a all-powerful figure and the sacrifice as well being presented and enacted and empowered by that divine figure or that ruler.